last year, on the night that Trayvon Martin was killed, he was headed back home to watch the NBA All-Star Game. I was in Orlando the same night watching the All-Star Game. And unbeknownst to me and unbeknownst to any of us, he was gunned down. Young black man walking home from the store with nothing but Skittles and iced tea. And what I find to be interesting is I see folks and they say, well, here he was, a young man, and he had some marijuana in his system, and he had gotten in trouble in school. But when I think about Trayvon Martin having marijuana in his system at 17, I think about somebody who is sleeping in this White House right now, who admitted to having marijuana in his system when he was a teen.
Talk about it.
And so if you think about it, that if the person sitting in the White House right now, President Obama, moved on from that when he was a teenager and ended up in the White House, where could Trayvon Martin have ended up? And so what has happened is we have allowed folks to somehow describe our children, our nephews, our brothers as thugs. That's right. Without giving them any purpose in terms of where they could be 20, 30 years later. And see, what everybody here needs to understand, that it's one thing to sit here and in this moment express outrage, but the question is, when does a moment become a movement? And so you have young people across this country who are angry, who are upset, folks who had candlelight vigils and they had hoodie up marches, and what they should be doing is doing the exact same thing that black folks did on the night of August 28th, 1955, when Emmett Till was lynched. Because if we understand our history, Emmett Till was killed August 28th, 1955, and the Montgomery bus boycott started December 1st, 1955. When Rosa Parks sat down on that bus, she was not saying, "I'm tired," she was thinking of Emmett. And when you think about 55, and then you think about all those young people who were members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, individuals who left college campuses under the threat of expulsion, and they said there's something bigger for me to get involved in, and they were the ones who were called 20th century radicals. Right. So the real question is not, are we pissed off, are we angry, are we upset? The question is, will 21st century radicals be developed as a result of his death and the death of others? Because we can stand here and talk about our letters, we can talk about our universities, we can talk about our education, but what does that matter if your name is Sabrina Fulton and tonight you're mourning the fact that your son did not get justice at the hands of the person who killed him? And so when we leave here, the real question is, how do we take our infrastructure? How do we take our organizations that have international infrastructure and national and regional and state and local and grad and undergrad and begin to use that power to mobilize and truly transform and have a 21st century fight for social justice? Because it means nothing for us to talk about stepping. It means nothing for us to talk about the value of our organizations. It means nothing for us to stand here and talk about famous deltas and famous alphas and famous kappas and famous omegas and iotas and zetas and sigmas without realizing that they became famous because they put their lives on the line.
Absolutely.
And do understand, it is even about being willing to sacrifice your job and livelihood for saying what's right.
That's real.
See, I got folks tweet me now, and they saying, "Man, I sure wish Roland Martin was on CNN," but do understand, I went to work every day with the thought that I might get fired, and that was fine. That's why I said what I said while I was there. That's right. And so here we are right now trying to figure out what's the next step. And here we are trying to figure out how do we move forward, and what it's going to require. It is going to require some intestinal fortitude that, to be honest, this generation has not had. Because we have had families, mothers and fathers, who have wanted to shield us from all of this, who have wanted to keep that from us, when the reality is, this is when this generation says, now is the time to be 21st century radical.
That's right.
And what that means is it's not just registering to vote. It's not just voting in a presidential election. Because understand, January 2017, he's gone.
Yes.
Right.
But what it means is not ignoring state elections where stand your ground laws are passed.
Absolutely.
What it means is voting in those state rep, state senate, gubernatorial races where the individuals are responsible for voting rights changes.
That's right.
And even beyond that, what it means is being willing to stand up and say, we are not going to allow another young black boy or black girl to be killed, and we are going to be silent.
Yes.
What it means that whether or not it's Trayvon in Florida, or whether it's all those brothers being killed every weekend in Chicago, or New Orleans, or St. Louis, or Baltimore, or D.C., that means that we're using our institutional power to say, no, that's not going to happen.
Detroit, Michigan.
And what it also says, for this generation, and this is the real test is, are you willing to be in the fight for the long haul? Because do understand, we can talk about Shuttlesworth and Fannie Lou Hamer. We can talk about King and Ella Baker. We can talk about Constance Baker Motley. We can talk about Hosea Williams and Andrew Young. We talk about those people, but do understand, when they got involved and put it on the line, they were 17, 18, 19, and 20. They were not 30 and 40. They were the same age many of us now. So the question is, can we take our youth, our vigor, our passion, our fury, our anger, and take that and channel that into a massive social justice movement that will make them proud?
Yes.
This is not a time for us to be cute. This is not a time for us to say, all right, I'm down with it for a couple of weeks, I'm down with it for 6 weeks, I'm down with it for 3 months. Because do understand, there's a sister here right now who is going to birth a boy. And there's a sister here right now who one day, unfortunately, might have to experience what Sabrina Fulton is experiencing. And it has to be that personal. Because do understand that Emmett Till's mother wanted that coffin open for a reason, because she wanted the world to see what happened to her baby. And today, too many of us, no, we don't want to show the picture of Trayvon Martin lying on the ground on TV because it's too unsettling. I say no. Many of us should see the picture, to have it seared in our minds, is to understand that when it comes to fighting, when it comes to justice, you should think about that picture every single step of the way. And I want everybody here to understand, this is very clear, and I've said it before, I start every job with the premise I'm going to get fired anyway. And so when I talk about on Tom Joyner, we talk about on TV One, we are not going to be silent. We are not going to be afraid to challenge. And when we got to call some folks out, we will call them out. And the challenge today is also for our organizational leaders. As to whether or not they are going to be willing to get in this fight. And the challenge for you is, if our organizational leaders, be they fraternities or sororities, be they civil rights or business, if they are unwilling to be in this fight with us, then it's our job to throw them out of office and to put in people who are ready to do battle. I'm going to leave you with this, and I tweeted this earlier. Anybody who reads the Bible will read a story in 2 Samuel 23 where there was a field of lentils, and the Israelites thought that it was not that important. So they said, we're not going to fight over that field. But there was one of David's mighty men named Shammah who said, no, if God gave us this field, it's worth fighting over.
That's right.
And he stood there and said, I'm taking everybody on over this field of lentils. The other Israelites saw that field as simply a throwaway. Just like a lot of our folks simply see another black kid as a throwaway. A whole lot of us just see another black girl as a throwaway.
My God.
But somebody has to be a modern day shaman and say, no, I'm going to stand my ground. And I'm going to fight for each one of these lentils and each one of our kids. And I'm going to stand here and fight with my left hand and my right hand. And whatever you got, bring it on. But he was able to stand his ground, and the word said God was with them and he defeated them.
Yes.
And so for us, we should be saying today, who in our family, in our community, is a lentil? And if God gave us that piece of territory, gave us that child, gave us that aunt, gave us that uncle, that cousin, that nephew, that niece, we should have the willingness to fight for them just like Shema fought for a piece of ground. So if God gave it to us, we should have the willingness to fight for it.
Right.
And so when we leave here, what are we willing to fight for? Are we going to defend that piece of territory, or are we going to simply run by and say it's no big deal?
Right.
I say, no, you stand up and stand your ground. Because since Trayvon clearly stood his ground,
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
and Zimmerman killed him and got off, that means that every single child who is touched, who is laid a hand on, every single one of us will look like Shema said, I will fight you with my left hand and my right hand, and I am willing to fight for every single one of our children, and I'm willing to stand my ground.
That's right.
So you got to stand your ground on your job. Stand your ground on your church. Stand your ground in your frat. Stand your ground in your sorority. You got to be willing to look somebody in the eye and say, I'm not moving.
Yeah.
I'm not giving up. I'm not going to allow you to take another one of our children and to simply say they are irrelevant. This requires a radical thought, which is followed by radical action. So we came here tonight, but we all, when we step out of here, when we all leave here, when we all go back home, when we wake up in the morning, when we wake up and say, what is going to get me going? I just think back to the sisters who were actually singing tonight's program, Sweet Honey on the Rock, when they sang one of their freedom songs. And this is it. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. That's what it's going to take for us. And when we do it, everyone else will follow. If they follow us with our music, they're going to follow us with social justice. If they follow us with our clothes, they're going to follow us with social justice. If they follow us with everything else that we do, and they're going to follow us when it comes to this, I say, tonight, it's time to stand your ground.